Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Hello, Rush Nation, and welcome to the 5 Yard Dynasty podcast. I am your host, as usual, Liam, or at the FSA Tweets on Twitter, and we have a jam-packed show from the Week 7 slate of games. But first, Rich, my lovely co-host at Dynasty Island, how are you doing, my friend? You're flying high right now after the Jets win.
I'm very good. I also just want to show you my t-shirt.
Yeah, I knew you'd be wearing it. I knew it.
Shout out to Mugs.
Look, for those of you listening that can't see Rich on stream, you can head over at 5 Yard Dynasty or at 5 Yard Rush 8 o'clock every Tuesday, and you can see him wearing this lovely Sauce Gardner t-shirt with the cheese head on after the Jets beat the Packers last week. Just wants to rub it in a little bit more.
Yeah, it's going to be a regular fixture, I think. I'm very good, mate. Thank you. Very good. How was your week?
It was good. I mean, my dynasty rosters have started to minus the Packers losing 3 straight in a row, and haven't done that for a good number of years, basically back until Mike McCarthy. But good week. Dynasty wise, I think my redraft leagues went worse than my dynasty rosters, which isn't good. But yeah, how's your fantasy football week gone? Take the Jets out of it for once.
Yeah, I had a good one. I had another 69.69% win rate. That's two weeks on the trot, which I'm very pleased with. It seems, to be honest, it seems to be outside of fantasy charity tournaments where I'm doing abysmally. It seems to be a very good dynasty season for me so far, which would. Let's hope it continues.
Warrior Bowl and Scott Fish Bowl I'm doing okay in. I'm doing better than average in. The rest of them I don't really want to talk about. I'm being beaten by Paul Picker, one of our writers, in the JT2, which he came last in last year, and he's loving the fact that we're in the same league and I'm below him. So keeps rubbing that in my face. But you've not come here to listen to myself and Rich gloat about our wins in fantasy football. You've come here to listen about some dynasty takes. So let's dive into the first segment, which is the highest scorers. So for those of you that are new, we use this points system, our 4-point touchdowns for quarterbacks and PPR for every other position, no Titan premium. Because I don't like it. So starting at the quarterback position, you've got Joe Burrow having a monster game with Jamar Chase with 39.2 points, Rich. That is Joe Burrow getting back to his highly explosive play style. I mean, he was sneaky good before this week, and then this week he just proved that he should be in that top tier. Or maybe even that tier 2. Depends on how you've got that top 5 or 6 in Dynasty right now.
Yeah, it was very impressive performance yet again. I think that's back-to-back weeks over 32 points, wasn't he? He's 32.5 last week, and then obviously 39 this week. Really impressive. We talked last week about the shift to essentially purely shotgun offense. They, again, only went under center basically for kneel downs and anything less than, I think it was 3rd and 1. They were under center once for a QB sneak potentially. I'm very intrigued to see how that goes over the next couple of weeks, because with the NFL, it's always a case of if you do something new and different, it takes, 3 or 4 weeks until somebody starts to get film and you starts to adjust, and it'll be interesting to see if that happens. So yeah, the Bengals are now an exclusively shotgun offense. Their run game is basically all RPOs and shotgun runs. So it'll be interesting to see if now teams realize that, and that's now a 2-week thing, how long it takes teams to adjust, and whether we're going to see potentially this continue for another week or two, although it could then potentially dip down in sort of 3 or 4 weeks. So yeah, very, very interested to see how defenses adjust against Joe Burrow.
Yeah, Rich, you were right. It was over 32 points. It's 32.5. So kudos to you with your memory skills there. I have no idea how you remembered that because I can't remember who was even in the top 3 of each position last week. And then moving on, QB2 on the week was Andy Dalton with just under 30 points. Massive Thursday night game, throwing 2 pick sixes, which I'd argue one of them wasn't his fault. But monster game from him. And then Daniel Jones as QB3. So 2 guys that we probably didn't really think about as top 3 quarterbacks on any given week. But Daniel Jones, Rich, QB3 with just under 29 points. It's crazy to think that we're talking about Daniel Jones here, considering he was going for late second type of value like in the offseason.
As much as recently as 2 weeks ago, I think.
Well, yeah. How do you see Daniel Jones right now? Because the Giants obviously don't have the 5th-year option picked up on him, so he is a free agent next year, playing for his contract. But for fantasy purposes, and I suppose for the real-life NFL, he's taken a real step forward. And we've always known that he's had that rushing upside, but he's taken that to the next level in terms of fantasy production, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I've been out on Danny Jones for the last 6 months because I was convinced that there is no way he is the starting quarterback for the Giants next year. Because the way I view kind of head coaches and regimes is in the NFL is that unless you are elite, you get 1 pick at a quarterback. Daniel Jones is coming to the end of his rookie contract. He is a free agent at the end of the season. In order for him to be the Giants starting quarterback next year, they would have to re-sign him to a, probably 20 million plus a year contract. That's essentially Brian Dable staking his future as the Giants head coach on Daniel Jones. And I've always just been of the opinion that's not going to happen. They're going to have this year. They're tearing things down. They're going to be in a position where they can, a bit like the Bills did under Sean McDermott, a bit like the Bears are doing this year, where they have a competitive first year, but it's really about that second year. We get a quarterback in. Let's build around the team going forward. I'm ready to have that conversation now. I don't know if I'm there to say Daniel Jones is going to be the quarterback for the Giants next year. I think I'd still lean towards him not being around. But look, they're 6-1. I think at this stage we can say they're going to be in the playoffs. I don't know if they sign him to like a massive deal. Maybe it's like the Andy Dalton deal that he got when he was with the Bengals, where it was like mid-tier money, and it was basically a year's rolling contracts. And I wonder if that's the deal that they're going to sign him to. It'd be 20 to 25, maybe like 30 million guaranteed. So he gets like a year and a half guaranteed. So they're not committing to him long term, but he hangs around for another year. But yeah, I think, look, I don't really know what to say. He's QB9 on the season. He's doing fantastically. He brings really interesting running upside. I want to be more confident that he's going to be around and he's going to be a great dynasty asset. But I am a little bit concerned that I think if he's not the Giants starting quarterback, I don't think he's going to be a starting quarterback, and that value just plummets. So yeah, I can't sit here and say he's a great buy, he's a great asset, because I apologize. This is awful content because I literally don't know what to say, but I just can't decide whether to commit to him or not from a dynasty perspective. So yeah, if you feel confident that he's going to be the Giants starting quarterback, then he's probably an incredible buy. If you feel confident that he's not going to be the Giants starting quarterback next year, then you probably need to be selling him as soon as possible, because come the end of the season, his price is just going to plummet.
So let me put this scenario out there. You're a contender. You're looking for either a QB3 with some of the news or some of the buys hitting. What kind of price are you looking to pay for him right now? If you're a contender and you're not too worried about the future, I mean, obviously there probably are the better options, but right now, contender, probably not looking to the future for this pick. What are you looking at buying?
I'd pay any second for him right now.
Pay more, maybe 2 seconds.
Maybe if one of those is 2024, then yeah, I wouldn't pay 2023 seconds. He's in a tier for me with Geno Smith, Tom Brady, Jameis Winston, Mac Jones, where I'm like, you've all kind of got some fancy potential and some fancy production. You know, I think Geno, Brady, Daniel Jones are all good this year, but I don't know what is happening next year. And that's kind of the bucket I'm in on all of those guys at the moment.
So, Rich, moving on to the running backs, we've got Austin Eckler with another week of over 30 points. I believe that's 3 in a row now. And then just 0.2 points behind him is Josh Jacobs, again having an absolutely crazy season. Then a guy that's just snuck into the top 3 at the running back position is Kenneth Walker. I mean, there's a bit to discuss there, but Josh Jacobs, Rich, at the moment, he's running back 2 on the week, and he's inside the top 5 at the moment on the year in PPR. He's being used as a workhorse right now. Do you see this happening for the rest of the year? What do you see with his future? Because he's not got a contract right now with the Raiders.
I think he is. I mean, you can't. He's an amazing buy, but you can't go and buy him because I think his price is going to be sky high. But look, the reason he was valued as he was, and yeah, you can slag him off and say, you know, he wasn't getting the full workload. There was lots of talk of Amir Abdullah and Brandon Bolden and people like this that were going to take passing down work. He is getting, as you said, that workhorse role. Now, the concern is that he is a free agent at the end of the year. The history of free agent running backs in the last couple of years hasn't been great. I don't expect him to get a massive deal. If you were to say to me that he's going to re-sign a contract extension for 2 years to stay in at Las Vegas, great. He'd probably jump 5, 6, 7 spots in my ranks. But I just don't know what's going to happen at the end of this year. And for me, I'm a little bit nervous investing in him at the price you'd have to pay right now to go and get him. So I think if you've got him, if you're a contender, ride him till the wheels fall off. It's basically what Las Vegas is doing, let's be honest. If you're not a contender, I think you've got to be selling him right now.
Rich, another running back that I wanted to talk about, kind of mentioned it just, is Kenneth Walker. I mean, this is his second great game. What do you see for him in the future? Do you see him being a mid to late RB1 for the future now, especially with his current age and what potentially is going to happen in that backfield with Penny now out on IR, but for the season and no one else there? Are you kind of expecting him to be in that just fringe running back 1, mid running back 1 question mark?
No fringe running back 1 for me. He's firmly a mid running back 1, I think, from Dynasty circles. Look, the guy was a great prospect. I think he was like a 92nd percentile prospect in my model. He ticked every box. The only question mark was potentially the pass catching ability, which we didn't really see in college. And then he's a little bit slow to get going in the NFL because he was playing behind Rashard Penny. But as soon as that injury's gone, his wheels up. He's been fantastic. He's my RB7 currently, so he's in a tier behind Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler. I could easily see him jumping over both of those by the end of the year, and put him in that kind of Swift, Barkley, Breece Hall tier. I think that you've seen everything you need to know. I think the guy's going to be a fantastic running back asset for the next 2-3 years.
So, Rich, moving over to the wide receivers, Jamar Chase, kind of not expected, but a name that you don't get surprised about as the wide receiver 1 on the week. And 2, again, surprising names. You've got Tyler Boyd, another Bengals wide receiver, with 29.5 points, and that mostly coming from a lot of it coming from a long touchdown pass with a lot of rack in there. And then Mecole Hardman with a multiple touchdown game as the wide receiver 3 with 28 points. Is this just a way of saying that wide receivers so deep you can play anyone and they've got the chance to pop off? Or how are you interpreting this week? Or was it just that crazy and there are so many wide receivers that were out? Like, Justin Jefferson. Was it just?
I don't know if you can
bye
say
week or AJ Brown, Cup, and etc.
Stephon Diggs, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can say just play anyone. Look, Tyler Boyd is boring. He's unsexy. He's perennially underrated, and he will continually produce as a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, and have boom weeks. That's Tyler Boyd, and that's going to be Tyler Boyd for the next couple of years. Mecole Hardman, look, you can't look at what he put up and say that that's a great wide receiver performance, because most of it was done on the rushing side. He is a gadget piece. He is lightning fast, and he's going to have boom weeks where he scores a couple of touchdowns, has a long run, has a long catch. Yeah, fantastic in best ball, but I'd love to see people that started Mecole Hardman in their dynasty rosters this week, and probably someone will start him and think, oh, he might have another week and he'll probably burn you for the next 2. So yeah, I don't particularly like rostering Mecole Hardman. I'm probably never going to roster Mecole Hardman unless he carves out a significant role. It's just a fluke that happens every now and then with him.
So Rich, moving over to the tight ends, we've got George Kittle, again, another name that we're not too unfamiliar with at the top 3. Then you've got Juwan Johnson, again, a name that we've heard of this season, but don't think we ever expected him to have multiple weeks in the top 12. Yeah, the top 3, sorry. And then you've got Travis Kelce, 5 points behind Juwan Johnson, with 15.8 points. Again, this is no tight end premium. This is just normal PPR. But Rich, George Kittle, is this his welcome back game, or is this just a boom week for him?
I think this is absolutely his welcome back game, and I think this is absolutely
the
opportunity.
Day, by the way,
the most ridiculous holiday ever. This is absolutely your opportunity to go and sell George Kittle. I want no part of George Kittle. I think that he is going to be boom bust. I think that now there's 4 legitimate weapons in that offense that are all going to be commanding target shares. He's not going to be able to see, he had a 19 point something target share this week. He's not going to be able to see that on a week to week basis. So yeah, I think if you can get top 5 tight end prices for George Kittle, I'd absolutely do that right now. I think, look, for me, he's not in that elite tier, and he's probably in the 3rd tier in terms of where we're looking in terms of tight ends. So if you can use this to spin him off and say, look, George Kittle's back, great, go and do it, because I don't want any pieces of him moving forward.
So if you're a contender and you've
got George, don't just go and give him away, but make sure you get a decent price for it.
So if you've got George Kittle and
I think you're on mute, Liam. I can't hear you.
I'm still here. I haven't muted myself. Can you hear me now? This is where Rich figures out that his AirPods have dropped or something. Right, I'm just going to have to carry on talking. So what I was going to ask Rich is, if George Kittle, if you're a contender, you've got George Kittle, should you trade up for like a Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews? And that's probably something that I personally would do. I don't know how Rich values that, but I think I'd add maybe a second in tight end premium. We'll see what Rich has to say in a minute when he's connected his other set of headphones. But yeah, I think if you can add maybe a second to George Kittle to get someone like a Kelce or a Mark Andrews, that's probably a move I'm making as a contender. Rich, do you agree with that?
I didn't hear all of it, I'll be honest. I'm not quite sure what I did with my headphones, but managed to disconnect them. But yeah, I think you were saying pay up to go from George Kittle to go and get one of the
move up. Yeah, rather than move down.
I'd absolutely do that. To be honest, I think I'd add probably a first. I think I'd probably add a late first, maybe even a mid first to go from Kittle to Kelce or Andrews.
Is this tight end premium, or are you talking flat?
In a normal league, I'd add.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think I'd add probably anything later than like 7 or 8 in a first round to go and get Mark Andrews. Which might be a great. I don't think you have to pay that, because
Mark I don't think you do.
Had a bad week. I think you 2 seconds you're probably getting the deal accepted in an instant. But yeah, as I said, I'm really down on Kittle, and I'm incredibly high on Mark Andrews.
I think Kelsey is a good target right now, especially with him being on a bye. That Kelsey owner might be swung by a little lower deal than normal, but that's the highest scorers, Rich. We're going to move on to the significant news, and we do have a good portion of significant news, unfortunately. We'll start over with the Jets running back at Breece Hall. So he tore his ACL and is out for the season. That seemed to be confirmed pretty quickly. Considering we're talking about this guy maybe even being at the running back one conversation over the past few weeks. Tough loss for obviously your Jets, but then a tough loss for dynasty communities, and obviously we feel sorry for the player himself. But then piggybacking onto that kind of news, Rich, about 24 hours later, maybe even a little bit longer, we had news that James Robinson is being traded from the Jacksonville Jaguars to the New York Jets. So Breece Hall has gone down for the season, and you've gone and traded for James Robinson, who was doing really well at the start of the season, kind of tailed off for the past few weeks. How do you value both in Dynasty right now and James Robinson for the rest of the season?
So I think, first of all, the Breece Hall news was absolutely devastating. As a Jets fan, as a big Breece Hall fan, it's just not what you want to see at all, is it? It was grim. I think he's, for me, still a top 5 dynasty running back. They've said it's only an ACL tear with some light meniscus damage, so no damage to the LCL or PCL or MCL or anything like that. So should hopefully be back in time for the start of next season. So yeah, if you're not competing this year, if you're rebuilding, I think Breece Hall's a very good, interesting player to go and buy. The James Robinson side of things, I think it was fantastic from a Jets perspective. They were very aggressive in going out and trading for running back. I think it shows that they really believe they can make the playoffs this year. I think we're probably going to see like a 60-40 split, and I think it's going to lean more towards Michael Carter. I've seen some people writing and saying that Michael Carter's going to keep his role and James Robinson's going to take over the whole of the Breece Hall role. I don't foresee that at all. I think Michael Carter's going to probably handle all of the third downs, all of the 2-minute drill, and get worked in on some first and second downs. And then James Robinson's going to be a first and second down back with, a little bit of alternative usage. But I still think this is going to be a Michael Carter-led offense, running game, rather than a James Robinson in terms of opportunities. Yes, James Robinson might see more touches, but I think Michael Carter's going to see the higher value touches. In terms of the Travis Etienne side of things, I think it's massive, isn't it? We've seen a couple of weeks of him producing. I was super high on him in the pre-draft process. I then sort of, as we went through the draft process and obviously the injury and things like that, I sort of basically went, I'm out on him. I didn't expect him to return to this sort of value. Question for you, Liam. Top 12 dynasty back moving forwards. Do you think that's too rich? I've seen some outrageous moves and prices quoted. He's going for potentially 2 firsts in some leagues at the moment.
What? I'm selling him for 2 firsts easily.
Yeah, according to the DLF Trade Finder, 2 firsts has been a common trade in the last.
That's got to be 2 late firsts, right? That can't be anywhere in the mid.
Yeah, I'd imagine it needs to be late firsts, but still, a 23 and 24 first for Etienne feels rich.
Yeah. I'd easily sell for 2 firsts. The only time where that kind of becomes questionable is if a 25 first would be involved. If it was a 24 and 25, I'm probably not doing that just because 25 firsts are so far out. I don't ever see the value of picking one up right now unless it's a free throw in. Coming back to your top 12, I was sat there trying to think of my top 12 running backs, and at the moment in the dynasty landscape, it's a bit murky around the 12 spots. Like that fringe RB1 kind of sees a lot of running backs kind of hovering around in that area. So personally, I'd say no. I still need to do my dynasty rankings based on this trade, but just thinking about it there, I can't foresee a world where I can put him in right now. He has started to get more usage. He has started to get more snaps over the past few weeks, and that's probably why they traded Robinson away, because one, they can get something for him. He was an undrafted free agent. He's been there for a few years. So it's good churn and good turnover and profit at the end of the day. But they've seen enough from Etienne to want to play him and want to give him that workload. And a bit that's kind of unspoken about right now is Etienne's not going to obviously get 100% of the opportunity there. And Jermichael Hasty only a few weeks ago ripped off a huge run. I think Jermichael Hasty is going to have a bit more of a role in this offense than people realize. He's not going to be just a backup that you never see, kind of like I don't know, Dontrell Hilliard at the Titans with Henry in front of him, or someone along those lines. I think he's going to be involved. I'm going to say he's fancy relevant yet, but he's definitely going to be involved. So coming back to your question, no, I don't think he's a top 12 running back right now, but that could easily change in 2 weeks' time when he's had 2 20-point games. That gets you thinking.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic point as well, pointing out Jermichael Hasty. I think, look, with Travis Etienne, he's in that range. He's running back 12 for me right now. So yeah, he's
around that range. I agree, but I don't think it cracks my top 12 yet.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing you're saying about the Jags, I can't get my head around this. I've read a few people say it in the last 2 days. I can't get my head around people saying that the Jags did good for selling James Robinson for what is going to be a 5th round pick. I know there's talk that it's a 6th. Yeah. If he gets 260 rushing yards, it's going to be a 5th. So we can just call it's a 5th round pick.
Yeah,
like that's basically nothing.
It's cheap,
and
I agree.
But everybody's like, well, James Robinson was a free agent. They weren't going to keep him, blah, blah, blah. James Robinson was an exclusive rights free agent because he's an undrafted free agent. So all that means is that the team have to offer him a minimum contract, and that's it. He's on the roster. He can't go out and sign in free agency. So, like, he's the perfect backup running back to have for Travis Etienne. I don't get why you'd move off James Robinson for a 5th round pick. I think it's wild. And I think for the Jets, it's fantastic because you've got James Robinson. You can use him for the rest of this year. You can keep him dirt cheap next year to potentially ease Breece Hall back in. Or you can use him as some sort of, sign and trade. If someone wants to come and pay up for him, you can sign him to a deal and trade him away, sort of NBA style. And you've got profit. I feel like the Jags could have asked for a lot more than a 5th round pick. And I think perhaps them getting rid of James Robinson is more saying this is Travis Etienne's backfield than it was a good value to get for Robinson, because I don't think it was a good value at all.
I never said it was a good value. I just said they did.
That wasn't.
But the one thing I did want to ask you, Rich, is you said he was an exclusive rights free agent. He isn't. He is a restricted free agent. So for the listeners and for me, because I'm not hugely clued up on the difference between them, what is the difference, if you can tell me off the top of your head? And does that change your kind of perception of the contract situation, or is it a very similar situation and it doesn't really matter?
No, it's very different, and thank you for correcting me, because that is completely different. So exclusive rights free agent basically means that the Jets, as I said, his team could offer him a minimum contract, and it means he can't go out and sign anywhere else. So it's basically like a free extra year on the end of the deal.
Yeah.
Restricted free agent means that he can sign a contract anywhere, and the Jets have the right to match.
Okay.
And if they don't match, then they can place a specific price tender on him. So say they pick to put a 2nd round tender on him. Anyone who signed James Robinson to a contract would owe the Jets a 2nd round draft pick.
I see.
That the Jets could then have the option to match and keep him and not get the draft pick. So it's interesting. It is a big difference. And I'll take back everything I've said slagging off the Jaguars. That makes more sense now that he's a restricted free agent and not an exclusive rights free agent. So you can just ignore the last 4 minutes of talk about contracts.
But you are right, and I think that we're both on the same lines here. That it's Etienne's backfield now. For the majority, I do think Hasty does get a bit more work. But this move in the whole process is just the Jags saying we believe in Etienne, and this is now his backfield. Staying in the backfields of the NFL. This was news that broke after our show last week, so you probably already know it, but I wanted to add it in here anyway. Christian McCaffrey was traded to the 49ers. He played just a third of snaps and had 38 rushing yards, 24 passing yards. Myself and Rich had a bit of fun on Twitter, skimming up some play that Shanahan will probably end up running at some point. But yeah, Christian McCaffrey, I wanted to get your points on, or your take on this, Rich. How do you see this playing out for fantasy purposes? Because we've always said that if you can own the running back one, know who the running back one is every week in this backfield, then that is going to be fantasy gold dust. And now I don't think Elijah Mitchell is ever going to sniff any workload around CMC. I think that's pretty certain. So what do you see for Christian McCaffrey in the future?
Yeah, I think it's massive. I think he'll likely see probably less volume. I don't think we're going to see the 25 touches that he was in with Carolina, but I think he's going to be far more efficient. I think Shanahan's going to scheme him up all over the place. I think, we joked about it. It's going to be really interesting, the dynamic of having, Kyle Juszczyk, who's a movable piece, George Kittle's a movable piece, Deebo Samuel can line up in the backfield out wide, Brandon Ayuk's used on jet motions and end arounds and things, and then you've got Christian McCaffrey, who's an elite route runner. If he was a slot receiver in the NFL, he'd be probably a top 5 one at that, and he's also a running back. So yeah, I think this offense is going to be fantastic to watch. I think Christian McCaffrey is going to put up a huge amount of fantasy points for the rest of this year. I think it hasn't changed his value for me specifically, because I was already valuing him as a top 5 dynasty running back. The age concerns haven't gone. The injury concerns haven't gone. I think if anything, it's pretty much more of the same, just in a slightly different dynamic, because it's less volume and hopefully a little bit more efficiency.
Let's get off the running backs, Rich. So wide receivers, we've got a few pieces here. So Amon-Ra St. Brown left the game with a concussion after coming back. I believe it was even on the first series. So the big news here isn't that he's going to be out or has a big chance of being out, but that it wasn't deemed a concussion, and he should be back this week. So if you did have him in a few leagues, then he will be back this week. There's not much to worry about there. Mike Williams, he had a nasty looking injury. I don't know whether you saw the video, Rich, but a defender was tackling him, basically had the ankle underneath him and then was pulling Mike Williams over the top. So the ankle was all the way around the player. It wasn't very nice to look at. But that was determined that it was a high ankle sprain, not a broken ankle, which I know a lot of people were basically calling out and expecting. So that's maybe a 2 to 6 week injury. High ankle sprains tend to linger, so it's just something to look out for when he is back. It may take him a week or two to get fully up to speed. DK Metcalf tore a tendon. It's a patella tendon is the way I want to pronounce it, but he won't require surgery. So he probably sits this week and maybe a few others, but it's something just to monitor, because we don't have really any timeline on this. It's something to monitor. Rich, this is a injury to a player that we both liked as a little bit of a sneaky value, but now I'm not too sure whether this actually affects your dynasty opinion on him.
Hasn't changed a lot. I mean, the patella tendon is a horrific injury, and normally it's not one that people recover from, quite frankly. But the good news is it's only a mild tear. I think it's not a full rupture, is what I'm reading. So apparently that means that he's not going to need surgery, and he should be good to go in, potentially a week or two. So it's all good news. It's not changed his dynasty value massively. It just means that he might miss a couple of weeks.
Rich, let's move over to the quarterbacks. We've got Russell Wilson. He had a hamstring injury. He was out this week. It was a late decision within the week. But yeah, Russell Wilson hamstring. He's probably out this week. Potentially could play against the Jaguars in London, but I can't expect they'll try and play him unless he feels 100% fit. And his what was the corny saying he has? Was it vampire blood or something?
That's right. Oh, I don't know.
No,
he said some. Pay attention to anything Russell Wilson says. To be honest,
he said something stupid about having special blood, and that he heals better, and then was declared out this week, which I found quite funny, and very Wilson-esque. But he's probably out this week. Just something to look at when you're setting your lineups, and then. We've got a bit of a quarterback controversy. I don't know whether you saw this, but Mac Jones got benched during the game. I don't know how much of that came down to an injury because this was his first game back. He started, and then Zappi, the third or fourth round pick, I believe it was, came in and looked pretty good. I mean, it's a Belichick offense. He'll scheme around the guy that he's got in at quarterback, but maybe a little bit of controversy just for this season, but I think Mac Jones is going to be the guy going forward. Is that how you kind of view this situation, Rich?
God knows, who knows what Bill Belichick is thinking. It was weird because he came out and said that they'd always planned to use the two quarterbacks in the game.
And that broke just before the game, didn't it?
Yeah, they benched Mac for Zappi, and then the plan was to put Mac Jones back in, but the game was out of reach, so they just didn't. And it's like, I'm sorry, if you've got a starting quarterback that is, you spent a first round pick and you're committed to, he's your starting quarterback. I've never heard of it. So yeah, I think there's more to it than perhaps Bill Belichick is letting off. And I wonder if we see Mac Jones start this week, but that leash is incredibly short. So yeah, I'm concerned about him moving forward in his dynasty value, and I'm obviously quite optimistic about Bailey Zappi's dynasty value moving forward.
And then Rich, another quarterback that got benched is Matt Ryan. Now, if you're listening to this on Tuesday on the live stream, go put some claims in for Sam Ehlinger because he's already been named the starter.
Don't tell everyone that. I've spent a lot. Well, I hopefully have spent an awful lot of fab trying to buy Sam Ehlinger in a lot of leagues because I had quite a lot of Matt Ryan shares, and I'm in a little bit of a sticky situation.
Yeah, likewise. But you need to tell FF Goat or Paul, one of the Dynasty writers, because he's already got the article over to me for the waiver wire. So, and he's already got a Sam Ehlinger and Nick Foles in there. Because when I was talking to him about it, Sam Ehlinger is not a guaranteed situation, and Nick Foles is with his head coach that he won the Super Bowl with, I believe it was. So
he was offensive coordinator when they won. The Super Bowl.
Yeah, but there's still the offensive coach, shall we say? So it's just a situation to monitor because no one really knows what's going to happen. Everyone's going to put bids in for Sam Ehlinger, but you could see Nick Foles starting next week, and no one really knows.
Who knows? What I would say is Sam Ehlinger profiles. Obviously, look, he's a 6th round pick. Who the hell knows what he's going to be? But he was a more mobile rushing quarterback in college. He averaged like 10 to 12 rushing attempts a game when he was at Texas. So I'm expecting some rushing production. It doesn't always, unless they're Lamar, it doesn't necessarily translate to the NFL as to how much they're going to rush. But I do think there will be some rushing production there.
So, Rich, last piece of news is moving over to the tight end position. I've done this quite nicely without really realizing. David Njoku is the tight end 6 right now. I'm not including your boy Greg Dulcich, sorry, but he's only played 2 games, and I'm not putting him as the tight end 6 in points per game. But back to Njoku, he's probably out till about week 10. They do have a bye. The Browns do have a bye in week 9, but Njoku had an ankle issue, so he's probably out. Load up your Hunter Bryant shares, Rich.
Yeah, Harrison Bryant, I think he's
Harrison Bryant, sorry, not Hunter
well,
Bryant. That's the
Pharaoh Brown also got injured in the game, so Harrison Bryant's the only fit tight end at the moment in Cleveland. So yeah, fire him up. He's a tight end is going to be on the field at all times in Cleveland. So I'm sure he's probably available in some leagues.
Who's Hunter Bryant? Hunter Bryant's the Lions.
They came out at the same time.
Yeah.
No, they came out at the same time. It's Harrison Hunter. I want to say Hunter Bryant went to the Vikings. I don't know where he went after that.
This is beyond. You can search this. Let's move it over to the Dynasty stock market, Rich. As your first riser, you've got Ramondre Stevenson now. He had a great game yet again. Another roughly 20-point game. This was the first game where Damian Harris is back. So do you think that he was kind of being eased in, or do you think Ramondre Stevenson has just taken over that backfield? Because I saw that usage and it just looked like it was Ramondre Stevenson all over.
Yeah, so maybe I'm hinting, if you've not, tomorrow my DLF trade article comes out, and Ramondre's the headliner in that. Shameless plug, yeah. Look, I think that this is going to sound like a bit of a rant now. I apologise in advance. Look, I think that running back value in Dynasty, I think over the last 12 months has taken a big hit. And I think that we were spoiled by the 2017 draft class with Alvin Kamara and Joe Mixon and Dalvin Cook and all those guys. That incredible class that came in has basically been, the fantasy darlings for the last 5-6 years. They're all coming to the end of their careers. And I think that we're now seeing Dynasty running backs basically become a year-to-year proposition. I don't think that there are going to be many players at the running back position that you can roster and say they're going to be a starting running back in 2 years. And I think that, with the prevalence of injuries, you see Breece Hall. Breece Hall was held up after 5 weeks of his NFL career as the Dynasty RB1. That's now disappeared because he's gone and got injured and he's out for the year. Jonathan Taylor was the Dynasty running back 1. That's now disappeared. DeAndre Swift was the Dynasty running back 2. He's now been injured for most of the year. Najee Harris in the preseason was the Dynasty running back 2. He's now not in my top 20. I just think that the value on Dynasty running backs is so quick to explode and so quick to disappear that I think that you almost have to approach running back as a slightly redraft mindset and say, this guy is going to help me this year, and I'll think about next year when I get there, kind of thing. And I know that we've talked a few times about the offseason, how at the beginning of the offseason, I basically try and sell all my running backs because I don't want to roster them through the summer because they're one training camp injury away from their value plummeting. And I'm kind of like that now. And I'm like, okay, if I've got running backs, great. I don't really want to go and spend massive capital to go and acquire them. I'd rather go and spend a second round pick on Cordell Patterson or, James Conner or someone like that than go and pay for an elite guy. And the guy that I think you can go and buy right now that's not elite in price, but I think he's going to be elite in terms of production is Ramondre Stevenson. He is probably, for me, going to be a top 5 running back on a week-to-week basis. I think that we talked about it last week about how the Patriots have never given a full workload to a running back in the James White era. Well, the James White era is now finished. We've seen Ramondre Stevenson produce incredibly the last few weeks, and I really believe that he is now the workhorse back, and this offense is going to run through him. So if he's a top 5 back for me on a week-to-week basis, and I'm saying that I don't believe in kind of dynasty value long-term, I'm absolutely all in on Ramondre Stevenson from a dynasty perspective. I would take him over all those elite guys that you've known and loved over the past few years, that Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Leonard Fournette, he's a top 10 back. And I think that because of the short-term nature of the running back position, because of the way that we see these players explode and then disappear, look, I'm riding Ramondre Stevenson for the rest of this season because I'm really confident that I think he's going to be a stud. But the second this season's over, I'm selling because I'm so paranoid now with running back value that I think it's as soon as anybody gets valued as a top 5 back, I think you've got to sell him because you just can't invest that much capital and that much of your dynasty kind of team value in the running back position because it can literally just disappear instantly. There is nothing else like it. Even if a quarterback gets injured or a wide receiver gets injured, they hold value. Whereas, Breece Hall's injured and he's gone from the running back 1. In kind of November ADP, I would be shocked if he was a top 10 running back, despite the fact that he's young, he's a stud, everything like that, because it's what have you done for me lately at the running back position. So, yeah, I'm all in on Ramondre Stevenson. I think his value is growing. I think he's absolutely the kind of guy that people don't think he's a top 12 back, and you can kind of buy high off the back of these 2-3 great weeks, because I think people are like, oh, he's had a few good weeks, quick, let's sell. When actually, I think this is a sign of things to come for the rest of the season. But yeah, I would rather go and spend maybe a late first, maybe 2 seconds on Ramondre Stevenson than going and spending 2 firsts on Jonathan Taylor or 2 firsts on DeAndre Swift or something like that, because I just don't think the return on investment is there to tie up that much assets and that much capital in those elite running backs.
Rich, moving on to your second play, you've got Justin Fields on this list. Now, that's interesting considering the amount of talk around him not being very good this season, and rightfully so. He hasn't been what we expected from a guy like Fields. I know that I put more stock into that offense, the weapons, the offensive line, and the play calling than some other people do. But Rich, he's been incredible for fantasy, at least in the past few weeks. He had a great game against the Pats on Monday Night Football. So what are you doing with him right now? Do you think his value has risen to a point where it's kind of similar to where it was in the offseason, or do you think there's still a gap there?
I think it's close. I think it's getting there. I think that this shows to me the value in rushing potential, because he still doesn't look great as a passing quarterback. He still makes far too many mistakes. He still is very erratic. But the last 3 weeks, we've really seen him commit to the running game more. And he's had 3 QB1 weeks in a row. He is producing from a fantasy perspective because he's getting out and he's moving. And I think that, look, this is obviously a run-first offense. They are very much wrapping him in cotton wool and not letting him pass loads. But he's not been horrific. I did a little study in terms of today, first downs per pass attempt, because I think it's really interesting to see, at the end of the day, when you're passing the ball, you're trying to get a first down, aren't you? And shockingly, the 2 leading the league were Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, who are both just around 50%. Shocking, I know. But third was Justin Fields at like 45%. And it's like, so when he is passing the ball, he is moving the chains. He is getting those first downs. So I think that my concern in the offseason about Justin Fields was basically with what Chicago did, they weren't committing anything to Justin Fields. And they were saying, we're tearing this down. 2023 is when our rebuild starts. If Justin Fields succeeds, it's because he's good. We're not going to put anything around him to try and help him succeed. And at the moment, he's doing enough where I think Chicago are going to commit to him next year. And I think that for me, that can only boost his dynasty value.
So, Rich, let's move on to the fallers. You've got Deontay Johnson on here as your first one, a guy that we were both high on in the offseason. Do we see Pickett picking this up, pardon the pun, or are we just kind of hoping at this point that one of these wide receivers becomes the mainstay for Pickett?
This really hurt putting him on here, I'll be honest, because I do love Deontay Johnson. And
you do.
Targets are everything for a wide receiver, and yet he's getting loads of targets. He's getting good targets, and he's not producing. So yeah, it's painful. I honestly don't know. Kenny Pickett, I've been impressed with. He looks all right. He just makes stupid throws, and I don't think that's enough to cost Deontay Johnson. I think that he's there or thereabouts. I still think that Deontay Johnson is a good receiver. I still think he's a good fantasy asset. I still think he's a top 20 wide receiver. But I think now, he was a top 10 receiver for me at the beginning of the season. So he is definitely fallen, and I'm less confident in him. I think he's going to outproduce what he's done the last 7 weeks, because I think there is definitely some regression there. I think targets are real. I think, earning targets is a real thing, and the guy just gets open. But I am a little bit concerned that this is now, it's becoming a trend of not converting those targets, those opportunities into fantasy production. He's last in the league in terms of receiving yards per target, which, it isn't a real stat, let's be honest, but it does show that he's not really doing anything when the ball's getting thrown his way.
So, Rich, let's move over to player of the week. Now, you've just spoken a lot about those that have risen and fallen. So, a riser that I feel that should have been on the list that you haven't put on there is Juju Smith-Schuster, another guy that we both liked, but this time it's in the riser column, not the faller column. That's probably because his value dropped at the start of the season. He scored nearly 22 points in PPR this week. But what I really wanted to highlight here was this is his second week with over 100 yards and a touchdown. I mean, the touchdown part is nice, and it's obviously what you're looking for in terms of for boom weeks, because if you don't have a touchdown, which is basically free 6 points for anyone, then you're not looking at a really, really huge boom week. But what the biggest thing is the 200-yard receiving games for him. I wanted to gauge your thoughts on this because we were both really high on him. He's only 25 years old. He is on a 1-year deal. But do you think this is a start of something new as he's going into his bye week this week? Or do you think this is what we're kind of going to see from now on? Or is this kind of a flash in the pan and we might see a few more weeks of this, but it's going to be a lot more up and down, kind of like the start of the season has been for him?
I don't know. I'll be honest. I've yet to watch this game. I'm hoping to watch it tomorrow. I'm really intrigued to see what they're doing. So basically, the Chiefs in the offseason kind of went, we're letting go Tyreek Hill, and we're going to try and replace him with like 3 guys. And they basically said, Juju is the guy that when teams play zone against us, Juju is going to beat the zone. He's a big body inside that will find soft spots and we'll be able to get the ball to. So he's kind of our zone beater. So I'm really intrigued to see if the reason he's had a good game was because they played a lot of zone against him, and it just happened that that's almost like the Juju week, or whether there was a mix of coverages and he did do different things with it. So that's kind of me wanting to watch the game and have that opinion. I think just with the way this offense is now, you're going to see some boom spike weeks from Juju. You're going to see some bad weeks. I think you've just got to roll with it. I don't know if I'm ready to commit to him long term, because I just think that he is basically going to be a boom bust option.
So Rich, let's move over to your player. Who have you got for this week as your player of the week?
So my player of the week is DeAndre Hopkins. Look, he came back and suddenly the Cardinals' offense looked amazing. Who'd have thought Kyler Murray's stats before this year, passing to DeAndre Hopkins and passing to everybody else, were miles apart, and suddenly DeAndre Hopkins comes back and the Cardinals look like a functioning offense. I think DeAndre Hopkins is a top 12 receiver the rest of the season. If you're a contender, he's absolutely the guy that you need to go and buy, because I think his value is still very low. I think you can probably get him for less than a first. You're probably kicking yourself because you should have bought him 4 weeks ago rather than now. But yeah, I think he's a really good option. And I think that if you're, I said it, I can't remember if I said it on this pod or with the wildcard guys, but if you're a contender and you don't have DeAndre Hopkins, I think you need to take a look at yourself, because you've probably missed the boat. But if you can still grab him cheap now, I'd go and at least ask the question. You
didn't say that on this pod. You said something very similar, but it wasn't the exact same. Okay. I don't think you specifically said you need to look at yourself. I think that's a bit harsh, Rich.
It was obviously on the wildcard pod.
So, Rich, moving over to the flex off. The flex off competition. So for those of you that are new, the way that me and Rich do this is it's competition between myself and Rich. And we go head to head every week. We pick a player in flex consideration that is, in our eyes, when we look at the Fantasy Pros ECR, that is, or the weekly ECR, I just wanted to point that out. It's outside of the top 36 wide receivers, top 24 running backs, and the outside of the top 12 tight ends. Rich, neither of us have gone for a tight end yet, and I think that says a lot about the current situation around the tight end position. But looking at the standings this week, Rich, it's 3-3. You did end up pulling it back last week, which I'm going to call you a cheat for, but we both played the same game there. I'd say Chris Olave is a bit more of a cheating player than Dameon Pierce. And for those of you listening,
top 12 back for me last week. There's no way that was more.
Olave was higher for you as a wide receiver. He's wide receiver, single digit wide receiver, was he not?
No, not last week. No.
Okay. Anyway, for those of you that.
Okay, yeah, I'll take that back. Olave was wide receiver 9 for me last week.
Yeah,
Dameon Pierce was running back 12.
There you go. For those of you that didn't listen to last week's pod, when myself and Rich had a look at the weekly ECR, it was quite obvious that some people hadn't updated their weekly rankings. So Chris Olave and Dameon Pierce were both up for grabs. And so was DeAndre Hopkins, that we both considered and decided not to, because we thought that was a bit too far, even though Olave and Pierce were picked. So out of those two, Rich did win and pulled it back to a 3-3 score on the season. Rich is on a 2 winning streak now. So Olave scored 17.6 points. Pierce only less than 2 points behind him. But unfortunately for me, Rich did pull out their win. Now, Rich, I'm going to start with my player for this week. I've gone for Donta Foreman, a guy that tore his Achilles a few years ago, and now CMC has been traded. He just had over 100 yards on the ground. The question mark I have around him is the fact that Chuba Hubbard was splitting snaps with him going into this game that's just happened this week. So I think Donta Foreman, if he has a touchdown in his game this week, we're completely talking differently about him, because a lot of people just go through, look at fantasy scores, fantasy points, and that's it. They don't really look at their games. So Donta Foreman, I think, has a solid floor, but still has that upside that I want to see. He's currently the running back 35 in ECR, so it's not like I've just picked the running back 25. But Rich, who have you got as your flex off competitor this week for you?
So I thought, after being accused of cheating last week, I thought I'd go a little bit deeper. So I'm going with Wan'Dale Robinson, who is the wide receiver 44 So, deeper than you went, Liam, in terms of where he's currently being ranked. Look, the guy, I don't quite get this ranking because basically when he's on the field, he's getting force-fed the ball. And there is nobody else I'm going to say Green Bay then, in New York, that's basically getting the ball.
At this point, I'd rather have taken Wandale over Christian Watson with how our season has gone, and that's saying something.
Yeah. Look, he's basically the only fit wide receiver in New York. He's going to get force-fed the ball. He's, just to give you some stats here, so he's currently 6th in the league in terms of targets per route run. He's getting targeted on 30% of his route run. The only players ahead of him in the league currently, DeAndre Hopkins had an obscene week 1 target rate, Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, and then Tyquan Thornton, who doesn't really count because he's not really played properly. But look, so Wandale Robinson so far in his career is getting targeted more often when he's on the field than Cooper Kupp, than Devontae Adams, than Stephon Diggs. Like, I don't know what else I can say. At wide receiver 44, that seems absolutely outrageous. I think that he's got potential to put up a easily top 24 week in terms of PPR scoring this week.
Yeah, I like the pick, and I was thinking with my Donta Foreman pick when I saw you had already put Wandale on there that I needed to go with someone with a solid floor in case that Wandale doesn't put up those points and it was a flash in the pan, but also has that ceiling. So I kind of had a little bit of a strategy behind it, but ultimately it just comes down to whoever scores the most points. Rich, listener questions now, the last segment we've got for the dear listeners. What have we got in the bag this week?
So question from Martin, who's at Lucky Fantasy Guy. So he said, if you're not going to compete this year, would you try and acquire Breece Hall? If so, what is his value? So we touched on this at the beginning, Liam. Would you be going and buying Breece Hall right now?
I think it's good practice as a rebuilder to go and pick up a guy like Breece Hall that hasn't had an absolute catastrophic knee injury. As you said earlier, the reports were that it was purely an ACL and there wasn't anything else there. So I think that a guy with Breece's upside, it's a good opportunity to try and get a potentially top back when he comes back. Value-wise, I'm okay paying a 23 first, as long as it's not the 101, maybe the 102, just because that's going to be, with the way that the 23 class is looking, that's going to be a quarterback at this point. But I think Breece Hall going into next season is going to be ranked over a lot of the 23 running backs, if not all of them. What about you, Rich? Where do you see this value right now? Because I could be completely different to you, or you could have homerism and be completely higher.
No, I think it's a good buy. I think, it's not without risk. Anytime you're buying a player coming off an ACL, I would suggest maybe waiting a week or two. I think that right now, people that have lost Breece are reeling, but they're still probably valuing him as a top 5 running back, even though he's injured. I think that if you wait a week, you wait for what I call the pain of having to start, not Ramondre Stevenson, Chuba Hubbard or Donta Foreman, someone like that, and realizing actually I've walked away from 20 points a week Breece Hall to maybe scraping 10 points a week, then they'll probably be more willing, if they're a contender, to sell Breece Hall to try and get that win now piece. I think if you're going and buying Breece Hall as a rebuilder, it's got to be from a contender. So you've got to be paying up probably another running back. If you can pivot from someone in that sort of 3rd, 4th tier of Aaron Jones, Leonard Fournette, Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, I think that's an incredible move. I would probably sell Austin Eckler or Christian McCaffrey to go and get Breece Hall if I was completely rebuilding. If I was a contender, I'm sitting here as someone that sold a Breece Hall share for Austin Eckler, and I've felt sick since I did it 2 days ago. So, yeah. I think that's probably the right price point is Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler. But I think if you can sell a running back a tier or two below for Breece Hall, I think that would be a slam dunk move.
So I've got another question for you, Rich. So it's about Brian Robinson, a guy that's getting a lot of usage, but we're not seeing the efficiency right now. What would you sell for Brian Robinson right now, straight up? So as in picks, if we're picking a 107 or 108, where are you valuing him in the 2023 class?
I feel like you've read my DLF article because we've so far talked about every player that I put in there. I'm out on Brian Robinson. Okay. I feel like a horrible human being for saying that because he's had an incredible recovery. It's amazing from a personal standpoint. But look, I just don't think that is ever going to be a role that is hugely great for fantasy. He's splitting carries with Antonio Gibson. He's, in a negative game script, he's going to come off the field and JD McKissic's going to see the passing down work. It's never going to be Brian Robinson 3 down back. So I would sell for any second round pick in 2023 right now. I don't think you have to sell that low. I think he's in that conversation. I can't believe it, but he's in that conversation where he's like a fringe first, early second round pick that you can probably get back for him. But yeah, I would honestly take any second round pick because I just think people are looking at those raw box score numbers and going, wow, he had 20 carries. He's really a workhorse. And it's like, well, it's only because Washington ran the ball like 30 times. Antonio Gibson also got 10 carries. If that's a different game, if that's a different game script, he could have got, 12 carries and 12 carries with very little passing game. I think he got two targets. That's not going to get it done. So yeah, I'm out on Brian Robinson. I think if you can get an early second, if you can get a late first for him, that is an absolute smash. As I said, I would take any second round pick. I don't think you have to take any second round pick, but that's just how low I am because I don't see who wants the starting running back for the Washington team. Like it's not great for fantasy. They're probably going to have a new quarterback next year. It might be Sam Howell, it might be Tyler Heineke, it might be someone else. They're probably going to have a new head coach because I think Ron Rivera is going to get fired. They might even have a new blooming owner if the league can finally find a way to force out Dan Snyder. So yeah, I don't think, for me, I'm investing anything in Brian Robinson moving forward.
I think I'm about the same price point. I wouldn't take any second, but if I got offered a 23 first for him, I'd smash that every single time. I'd think about an early second. If you can get 2 seconds, again, smashing that. But yeah, I think right now Antonio Gibson is being overlooked because he's lost the role in quotation marks, but he's being hugely efficient in the role that he is playing now. I just hope that Ron Rivera sees the light and puts Gibson back into a more sustainable or a more guaranteed role, shall we say. But Rich, have you, apart from your DLF article, have you got anything else that you want to plug or remind listeners where they can find your DLF article?
Yeah, you can find my DLF. It feels like it's been mentioned more times than anything else. Yeah, you can find it on DLF.com. No, you can find me at Dynasty Ireland, and that's it.
We need to change the pod title to Rich's DLF article pod. So, listeners, that is all we have on the show sheet. So that's all we have for you. You can find us every Tuesday at 5 Yard Dynasty or at 5 Yard Rush as the live stream at 8 o'clock UK time or 5 p.m. EST. But until next week, guys, have a great week. Stay safe. We'll see you then.